Welcome back to Module 3. I'm Elise Naramore, your guide through this journey. I hope that you've had some time to digest the material introduced in Module 2. In the last module, we went through some of the theoretical underpinnings of this model, and now we are ready to get even more personal. The goals for this module are to make a list of values. The source of this list will be your own internal beliefs, the assessments that you have created, as well as state and national standards. Therefore, you're going to plumb the depths of your subconscious to bring your personal motivations to the surface. Why is this necessary? Having a strong conviction is important to maintain your direction. However, without being able to overtly explain your rationale, you will not hold on to your compass for long. In addition, it's likely you will get pushback from parents, students, or colleagues. If you cannot explain your why or the theoretical groundings, you won't bring others with you. And lastly, change is hard. You need to have something to hold on to and reread in order to remember why you are taking this journey. Ready to start? When Dave and I began this process, we asked ourselves what we wanted our students to leave our course knowing. Some of the things on my list were that I wanted them to know the basic vocabulary of physics, definitions mostly, how to solve an equation, what to do when they didn't know what to do, how to write a lab report, including a claim evidence reasoning cycle, how to use measurement tools appropriately in our lab, how to write an explanation using physics concepts to back up their response to a question, and how not to give up when things got difficult. Let's spend some time answering this question for yourself. What would my ideal student be able to do by the time they leave my class in June? In a moment, you're going to pause the video and take at least 30 minutes to generate this list. Be broad and be specific. Think of the types of tasks you generally assign and why you assign them. At some point, your well of ideas will seem to dry up, but don't stop. Sit and think, continuing to add things to the list. Don't edit. Don't let yourself be critical or distracted. And lastly, don't worry about repetition, grammar, or spelling. Just spill your thoughts out onto the page. Okay, pause this video and begin. See you when you're done. You should at this point have a page or 2 or 3 covered in thoughts. It may seem daunting, but don't stop now. We're going to look at external standards. Each teacher has an umbrella under which they work. This may be a district curriculum, a state curriculum, and/or a national guideline. It can also be state or commercial exams. For example, the NGSS, Next Generation Science Standards, published disciplinary core ideas, science and engineering practices, and cross-cutting concepts, all meant to help teachers guide students towards building a cohesive understanding of science over time. I can go onto their website to identify what my high school physics classes are expected to have mastered by the time they've exited my class. One example is designing and carrying out investigations. The NGSS has terrific criteria that I appreciate and agree with. However, their language is often impossible for students and parents to comprehend. My feeling is that you want to pull out the essence of the criteria without getting too caught up in the formal eduspeak, which can be intimidating to those outside of our profession. Therefore, out of their 3 bullet points, I created my own much simplified criteria. Instead of formulate a question that can be investigated within the scope of the classroom, school, laboratory, or field with available resources and when appropriate, frame a hypothesis, that is, a possible explanation that predicts a particular stable outcome based on a model or theory, I wrote, ask a testable question. Instead of how much data are needed to produce reliable measurements and consider the limitations on the precision of the data, I wrote, describe possible sources of experimental error and ways to reduce their effects. Instead of decide what data need to be gathered, what tools are needed to do the gathering, and how measurements will be recorded, I wrote, collect accurate data using appropriate tools. Every content area has published standards with a sequence from K through 12. There are also many states that have mandated curricula with similar outcomes. The College Board publishes their own objective for each of their advanced placement courses. You can find these online if you don't have a hard copy at your disposal. In a moment, you're going to pause the video and take your time while going through the standards for your level and your course. This may take a while, and don't rush. Here's a few suggestions. Focus on skills, not content. It's not that content's not important, but that your learning progressions will be about what the students can do with the content. Don't eliminate anything from your previous list, just add. Put their objectives in your own words using simple language. And lastly, don't worry about repetition, grammar, or spelling. Just spill your thoughts out onto the page. If you don't like to write or can't write fast enough, of course, use the talk to text feature on your computer or phone or work with a partner. Okay, pause this video and begin. See you when you're done. You've probably got a long list in front of you. None of it is organized, and there may be a lot of repetition and maybe even some nonsense. This is exactly what's supposed to happen. Great work. The next step. In the past, you've given assignments in which you presented requirements and criteria for success. This may have been in the form of a list of descriptors or a scoring rubric. Take out the various rubrics or scoring criteria that you have used in the past. As you look at your criteria line by line, find corresponding items on your list. For example, continuing with designing and carrying out investigations from earlier, I had an old rubric partially shown here, in which I was assessing if students can identify the problem being solved, communicate the details of an experimental procedure clearly and completely, and represent data in a meaningful way. This overlaps somewhat with being able to ask a testable question and collect accurate data using appropriate tools. So I would put a check mark next to those, but not next to describe possible source of experimental error. Don't cross it out. I'm just doing that to highlight what I'm talking about. To be clear, I know that not everyone uses rubrics. If you do not use rubrics, then take out any document in which you communicate the criteria for success. This may be the initial handout of an assignment that you give to the students. Go through your list and make a check mark next to the items that are represented on previous assignments or rubrics. If you cannot find the criteria on your list, you should add it. Okay, pause now and begin. This is the last part of this exercise. Don't worry, we're going to start reorganizing and culling this in Module 4, so don't worry if your list is pages and pages long. There may be some types of assignments that did not have a rubric or a list of descriptors. Most often, at least in my case, these take the form of tests or quizzes. Take out some of your answer keys or even student work samples if you have them. Ask yourself the following. What was the point of each question? How many points were each of the questions? What were the high value questions assessing? What did you give partial credit for? As you answer each of these questions for yourself, add them to your values list. For example, perhaps you took a point off if the student didn't include units on his or her response, or there were spelling errors in a creative writing piece. You would add to your list includes units on quantitative responses or spelling is correct as a value. Okay, pause this video and begin. See you when you're done. You've reached the conclusion of this module. Before beginning Module 4, please complete the remaining tasks listed in this module, which includes reading from the Going Gradeless book. In Module 4, you will change the language of your values list to create measurable outcomes. Welcome back to Module 4. I'm Elise Naramore, your guide through this journey. In the last module, we generated a list of values gleaned from your own practice, as well as external sources. If you need to refresh your memory, please pause now to read over your values list. The goal for this module is to make a comprehensive, concise list of outcomes. What is the difference between the values list and outcomes? The list of what you value probably is more of a wish list of behaviors and objectives mixed together. These are the intended results or consequences of instruction. Outcomes are achieved results of what was learned, the evidence that learning actually took place. The easiest way to transform your values list into outcomes is to simply change the wording. Every statement should begin with I can. Why I can? Because these are for the students, so it should be in language that they can relate to, and it should be positive, as in what can they actually do? And it should be concrete and measurable, since it's evidence that learning took place. Here's an example from a K through 2 grade level. Distinguish between opinions and evidence in one's own explanations. Change this to, I can write an explanation. I can identify whether my explanation is opinion or evidence. I can explain the difference between opinion and evidence. Notice that you may need to use several shorter or simpler sentences to replace the complexity of curricula designed for teachers to read and use. At the high school level, the national curriculum originally states, construct, use, and/or present an oral and written argument or counter-arguments based on data and evidence. I would change that to, I can present a claim based on the most sophisticated evidence from my analysis and tie it convincingly to relevant theory. Here's what I would suggest that you do. First, if you typed your list, please make a duplicate, saving it as outcomes. If you hand wrote the list, you may want to begin typing at this point. You will go through each statement in your values list and change your original standard or value to an I can statement. As usual, do not delete items from your list. Just change each item on your list to an I can statement, while remembering to keep the focus on what the students can do, make language age appropriate for your students, remove all the technical language, have the outcome be clearly observable and measurable. So just go through and do this line by line without being overly critical. We will do the editing next. When you're done, move on to the next video.